Hey there. So I think we are live. I'm looking in two different cameras, just getting everything set up so I can see you. So yeah, we are live. If you are watching live, then give me a shout. So this is a Q&A on strength and conditioning training for women, particularly female triathletes, female runners. So that's what I'm particularly going to be answering questions on. I've got tons of questions in advance, so I'll start on those, but then I will be checking in on what I've got on the screen and answering your questions as I go. So let's get started. So first of all, Susan asked, could I just go over the basics of strength and conditioning? So in terms of those basics, because we're often told, oh, you must do strength and conditioning, you must do weights, but we don't actually know what that means. So we want to be doing something that's going to add load, that's going to strengthen our muscles. That's the kind of main thing we're looking at with our strength and conditioning. I would add into that we want to add mobility and stability. So by that, I mean mobility at key joints. So as triathletes, we're using our legs a lot. So we want to be working mobility at our hips. We want to be working mobility at our thoracic spine. So the ability to kind of move through that middle spine. We want to be working mobility at our ankles, all the kind of places that might get a bit stuck. That's where we want to work. Now, when we talk mobility, we're talking movement at a joint rather than stretching, which is stretching a muscle. So, for example, I will start almost every session I do with some hip mobility. So tucking my tailbone under, loosening up the joint at the front of the hip here, because we spend most of our time seated, we get really tight here. Then when we want to run or something, take that leg behind us, we're lacking that mobility. So we want some mobility. Then we want stability. Now, stability is also about stabilizing those joints, which seems a bit counterproductive, but we want to be able to move the things that need to move. We want to stabilize the things that want to stay a bit more stable. So that's your things like your glute bridges, your dead bugs, your planks, things like that, stabilizing particularly through the core, through the glutes. And then we want to add in the strength. So the strength is where we're working the muscles. Now, I wouldn't go straight to that strength because we need that mobility. We need that stability to get the most out of our strength work. When we're doing our strength work, if we're a runner or a triathlete, the most of our time we're spending on our lower body. So I normally say about 80% of the work we do is going to be lower body. Some of that's going to involve our core as well, but mostly prioritizing our lower body. On our upper body, so particularly our shoulders, we're vulnerable to injury. But I would be looking at mobility and stability in the shoulders. We might add in some strength work, but not a lot. If you want to be doing that anyway for functional reasons, for body aesthetics, whatever, absolutely fine. But for runners and triathletes, the majority of the time would be on the lower body. So that would be things like squats, things like deadlifts, things like lunges, things where we're using heavy weights and we're working big compound muscles. So lots of muscles throughout our legs. Now, long term, we want to get to the point of being able to do about 5 to 8 reps. So we're lifting a weight that is heavy enough that we feel we can only do 5 to 8 reps. Now, when I say only do 5 reps, that doesn't mean on the 5th rep, you're literally crumpling into a heap. You want to always have about 2 reps in reserve. So I can do 5 reps, I could do 7 reps, I can do 5 really good quality reps. When you're first starting out, you don't want to be working in those rep ranges because that's going to be heavyweight and that's going to be terrifying and you're more likely to get injured. You want to wait or work up until you've got the confidence in what you're doing, till you've got the confidence in your technique, the confidence just in being in the gym or lifting heavy weights. So, and everybody's different. I can't tell you how long that's going to work, how long you're going to have to work up to that, but definitely spending some time more in a kind of 10 to 14 rep range, I would say ideally, and then building up from there. Now, when I do my bodyweight classes, when I teach my classes at home where I encourage people to have weights, but I give you the option of not having weights because I want everybody to be able to come to those classes, I do about a minute on each exercise, which is more than that in terms of reps. But generally, the weights that people have at home aren't quite heavy enough to get to the point where the muscles getting really tired. So our goal is to get the muscles pretty tired, ideally using more weights and therefore less reps. But if that's not an option for you, doing something is definitely going to be better than nothing. Susan also asked, does Pilates count? Pilates is brilliant. I love Pilates for so many reasons, particularly that stability in our glutes, stability in our core. It's not so good in terms of strength, though, because we're doing longer holds. We're not working in that kind of 5 to 8 rep range. So if you could do anything in the world, do some Pilates, absolutely, but add some strength onto that. If it's not an option for you, then don't ditch the Pilates. That is absolutely, a great exercise to be doing. And Susan also asked, do I need to add weights in? If you can. And with weights, so when I'm working out at home, I've got some kettlebells. I don't even know what this is. I think it's 8. No, it's a 5. So I would have a range of different weights. If you can have the adjustable ones like these, then that means as you get stronger, you can add more weight into them. I wouldn't be changing them over in a session. That's too much fat. But it just means as you get stronger, you can add in more weights. But what's the word? Experiment with the gym as well. I know lots of us have really bad memories of going to the gym. We feel it's a really unwelcoming place. There's so many more women in the gym these days than there used to be. And there's lots of classes for women lifting weights, or classes that kind of get you introduced to using weights. So if it's an option for you, have a go into the gym where you'll be able to have those heavier weights. Okay. Georgie, I've just seen you've joined. Hello, your question is on here. I will be answering it, and Marissa as well. So next question I got. Oh no, I've just shut my notes. Hang on a sec. I thought it was being really clever having it up on the screen there. There we go. So next question I've got, which is more important, weights or reps? Now I think I've kind of mostly answered that. But we want weight. So Marissa had asked, is training heavy more effective or equally effective than training to failure with more reps with lighter weights? Training heavy is better. Because it's going to take us less time, because if we can do 5 reps rather than doing 20 reps, it's going to take us less time. None of us have spare time. So, let's be as time efficient as we can be, but also because we're working that strength, particularly as we get older. And the reason that strength conditioning is so important for us as women is that as we go through menopause, and that may feel way off, or that may feel very, very close for you right now, but as we go through menopause, we lose estrogen. Estrogen is protective of our muscles, our bones, our tendons, as well as a whole load of other things. And so as we lose the estrogen, our body starts to become more vulnerable. The muscles become potentially weaker, the bones become weaker, the tendons become weaker. And so we want to be using our strength training to help preserve all of that, because muscle is so important for performance, but for everyday healthy living, as well as a whole load of other things we'll talk about as we go on. So we want to protect our muscles. We also start to lose strength as we get older. And so that's why we want to be using those heavier weights. Think of an example of just getting up off a chair. We weigh however much we weigh. That's a heavy load. So as we get older, we want to be able to get ourselves off the chair. If we fall, we want to be able to get ourselves off the floor or play with the grandchildren, the children, whatever. So we want that strength. So rather than doing lots of lighter reps, which are going to we can keep on going for ages. But if we're a runner or triathlete, we're training our endurance muscles anyway. It's that strength that we're missing. So that's why we want to do the less reps with heavier weights, so that we're maintaining that strength as we maybe start to lose it as we get older. Trying again with I've done it wrong again. No, don't cancel. I'm going to get there eventually. This will work fine in the practice. Okay, let me try it down here. Okay, is body pump good enough? So lots of people sort of asked, I do body pump. Can I use that as my strength training? Again, doing something is always better than nothing. So if it works for you and you enjoy it, if you enjoy it, you're going to keep doing it. So that is brilliant. I would say that body pump fits into that more reps, lighter weights, though. It may feel heavy compared with anything else you do, but most of those, you do like a track of music's worth of exercises. So generally you're not lifting as heavy as ideally you would like. But again, if you're not confident lifting heavy by yourself, and if that's what you're doing, brilliant. Same for high rocks. Again, it's more of an endurance class. We're doing or if you're doing a high rock style class, you're doing longer intervals and maybe therefore less heavy weights. And it's, as I say, it's more of an endurance class, and you're training your endurance rather than your strength. So ideally, we're looking to do real strength, not where our heart rate's our limiter, but where we can feel our muscles getting tired. But something is definitely better than nothing. Okay. Sharon asked a whole load of questions, all great questions. So is it okay to do the same set of exercises and try and gradually increase the weights, or is it better to do a different routine each time? Again, do what you enjoy doing, because you're going to do more of it. But I would say stick with the same set of exercises. Everything in our training, we're looking to progress. We don't get fitter if we just keep doing the same thing without progressing. Similarly, if we do lots of different things, we're going to get good at lots of different things, but we're not going to progress in it. Almost that kind of jack of all trades, master of none. So I would say stick with a routine and then progress it. Or you might want 2 routines. In the classes that I teach, I do a block and a B block, and we alternate those each week. So we get some variety, and so we can cover more things than we would just cover in one set of exercises. If you only ever do one set of exercises, you're going to be fairly limited in what you do. So you might want to do an A session and a B session, each week, or you might do A one week, B next week. It's going to depend on you and what time you've got. But yeah, I would have a sort of 2 set sessions that you alternate, so you can get more variety in there, but you're getting that progression. In terms of how you increase your weights, supposing we're sort of starting strength training, so we might start on being able to do 10 reps. So you find, supposing we're doing lunges, so one leg in front, other leg behind, dropping down, and then you're holding your weights as you go. So you might find, what's the heaviest weight I can be holding in my hands to be able to do 10 reps on one side and feel I've got those 2 in reserve, but I probably couldn't do more than that. So you write down that weight, you do the other side as well. And then the next week, you would aim to do 12. So same weights, but you do 12. Then the next week, you aim to do 14. Next week, you probably say, I don't want to go into 16. That's getting a bit too much. So now I'm going to add on some weight. So rather than adding weight each time, you start with the weight that feels right for you, and you increase your weight each week or each time you do it. Bearing in mind that the human body is dynamic. So one week you might go, oh my God, I'm absolutely knackered, didn't sleep, the kids have kept me up all night, whatever. And so I actually do less weight or less reps because I feel more tired. But if everything was equal, then we're looking for that gradual increase the reps, increase the reps, not forever, till we get to, say, 14 reps, and then come back down again to 8 or 10 reps, but with a heavier weight. Sharon's asked, what's the best go-to exercises? That's going to depend on your goals, but lots of people have asked questions about different sets of goals. So hopefully that will answer your question as we go. And then she says, if I do 2 30-minute sessions in a week, but struggle to fit in a third, is it better to stick at 2 or to add a shorter session? So 2 sessions a week is brilliant. So many women don't do that already. So well done, Sharon. Big thumbs up. If you could get in a third, even better. Or if you can make one of those 30-minute sessions a little bit longer so you can fit in a bit more, maybe it's more time efficient because you're already changed, you've already got your weights out or whatever, then you might find that was what you could do. What I find really effective is doing an extended run warm-up. So I would always say we want to do a run warm-up where we work on mobility. So again, we're getting that range of motion at the joints, we're getting that stability, things like engaging our glutes and things. So maybe you do a 15-minute extended run warm-up before you're running, which is going to not only mean you've done an extra 15 minutes, but you're getting more out of that run because now you can get that full range of motion. Your leg extends behind you when you're running, your glutes are really engaged, so you can connect your mind to your brain, your mind to your body, to your bum while you're running. So you get more out of that run. So that would be my recommendation if it works for you, adding in a little bit more before you run. And then that would just be mobility and stability. You don't want to go into your run tired, but then maybe you add on, 5 minutes of heavier weights when you get home because you're already warmed up, but you could just get in an extra quick go of an extra sort of weight session in there, and your calf raises, but I'll come to those in a second. Okay, this is where calf raises come in. So Julie asked, marathon training, what strength exercises should she do for marathon training? So any sort of running, and that's triathletes as well. First of all, we want to think about our stride length. So as I say, if we spend all day seated, our body adapts to the position we're in most often. So we end up with our hip flexors here getting very tight because our body goes, oh, you want me to be in this position? Okay, I'll get really good at being tight here. When we go for a run, we want to be able to extend that leg right behind us. If we can't extend the leg behind us, we end up extending at the front instead to try and get that stride length. And that's where we get to overrunning, which can cause us knee injuries. So instead, we want to be able to extend the leg behind us, not by, if we talk about our pelvis as a bowl of water, not by tipping the water out the front, by keeping our pelvis, our bowl of water level, but getting that leg behind us. So number one, hip mobility to be able to loosen up so we can get that leg behind us. So things like standing, tucking the tailbone under, you can do that in kneeling as well. I should have said at the beginning, I do a weekly strength and conditioning class online for women, well, for anybody for the on-demand session, women only for the live session. And all of these things I cover in so much more detail in those. So if you go to my website, feelfitwithlucy.co.uk/clubfeelfit, you'll find a free trial in there. So all of these things I cover in a lot more detail on there. So stride length. Then we want stability. So we want to make sure that our hips are stable, and we want to make sure that our ankles are stable. Now, people often get knee injuries and they think, oh, I need to do knee exercises. Knee exercises happen because either above or below the knee isn't stable enough. So, for example, when we're running, our knees are collapsing in or our hips dropping down. So things like working on glutes. I always say for my classes, you don't need any kit, but my first bit of kit I would recommend if you decide you're doing them is a thigh band, which just a few pounds off Amazon, goes around your legs like that. And then you're just doing a walk where you're getting those glutes engaging. And so doing that, like I was saying, that extended run warm up before you go running, something like that's really going to help to turn on those glutes so that when we're running, our hips are stable. Core work as well, glute bridges, single leg squats are really good. A single leg squat where we maybe want to look in a mirror or in our phone and check as we go into that single leg squat, is that knee collapsing? Is the hip dropping down? If it is, those are all things that are likely to be happening when we're running. Is the ankle collapsing? So the knees collapsing in. So all things that we want to make sure we're not doing when we're running, we can practice that in the single leg squat. So that's our mobility, that's our stability. We then want to work our strength and power. So things that I've already said before, but just to go over again, working those legs. So things like squats, lunges, split squats, deadlifts. Those are kind of your main things there, different variations. If you don't have heavy weights at home, then doing a single leg option of any of those is brilliant because you're training your balance, but also it's going to mean that you work harder on that single leg than you would with lighter weights on double leg. And it means if you've got an imbalance between one side and the other, then you're going to find out about it and you can start to train that weaker side. And then calves. So as runners, and I say anybody who runs is a runner, there's no definition of you've got to be good enough to be a runner. As runners, we want to make sure that we're doing 3 sets of calf raises 3 times a week. And each of those sets, we want to aim to be doing 25 to 30 single leg calf raises. That's a mix of straight leg calf raises, so up onto your toe on a step, just haven't got one here, and bent legs, so where our knees are bent and we're taking the heel up and down. So mix of straight and bent leg, 25 to 30 single leg body weight calf raises. That's the only one where we do talk about body weight because we really want that endurance in there. Ideally, that's when you get home from a run, just to show that you've still got that endurance even after you've done your run, that you can still do it, but find the time of day that works best for you and get it done rather than worrying about having to do it after a run. We also want to be adding in some power. So that could be when we're doing our normal squats, we're coming down slowly, but then we're powering back up, or you're doing your deadlifts down slowly, power back up. So we want to get some power in there. It could be things like kettlebell swings, where you're driving the hips forwards, working through the glutes, really good for activating the glutes before you go out, but also putting some power into your training. And then we also want to be doing, particularly as women, some plyometrics work. We tend to, as I say, our bones get weaker as we get older. And so we want to preserve that bone strength. So plyometrics, just little jumping on the floor. We could be doing side to side. We could be going one leg to the other, doing some side to side stuff because we never do that as triathletes or runners. We're always moving forwards. So low level, but something that's going to strengthen our bones and also really build that reactive spring in our foot. So we absorb the energy and we push off with power without losing all the energy. Particularly as we get older, we get less good at holding that energy and getting that elastic recoil. So we want to train that. And then pelvic floor. So training our pelvic floor, you don't need to have had kids to have issues with your pelvic floor. Training our pelvic floor, which we can do, we don't have to add it something separate. We can add it while we're doing our training. So thinking about as we come up on that squat, breathing out and engage the pelvic floor. Breathe in, relax, breathe out, engage. So just really simple things that we can do to engage our pelvic floor while we are training. Okay, next question. Do ask questions if you have any and you're joining live. Sarah asked about strength training to improve hill running. So everything I just said in the previous question. But particularly in hill running, we start to get more fatigued and we want to make sure we're preserving our form under that fatigue. So things like weighted step ups, just having a step and stepping up as you might, simulating almost going up a hill, either doing them for speed or doing them weighted. You can have a rucksack on your back or holding some weights. Walking lunges, again, can we preserve our form? So you're walking around and making sure as you do those lunges that your hips aren't wobbling, that you're not crumpling. So just thinking about nice, strong core, reaching up to the ceiling, preserving your stability, preserving your form as you go. Lunges are brilliant for runners. They're basically replicating everything we do when we run, other than hopefully we're not going down that low when we run, but everything else is about replicating that form. Then specifically in terms of running, often people go, oh my God, it's the ups that are hard, but actually what's harder on your body is the down. It's that decelerating as we go down. And often we end up overstriding with that leg coming out in front of us as we go down the hill. So practicing that, we can do some eccentric loading. So coming slowly down. So whether we're doing our lunges or whatever, but coming down slowly, really working on that control. And then we can do that power push back up. You could do, I don't know if I can do it here, but you could replicate that landing. So I'm just standing on a box behind me and coming down like that. So doing that landing through the foot, anything with the plyometrics, the jumping, build up to that steadily. Don't do too much too soon. That's where we get injured. Anything we're talking about today, if we do too much too soon, we can risk getting injured. And calf strength, particularly, I've already talked about calves, but when you're pushing up a hill, you've got even further to push up. So working on that strength, but also working on some of that push off, that power, again, adding in your plyometrics there. Catherine asked, so she knows she needs to be lifting heavy, but what if the limiting factor isn't her body strength, but something like either grip or mobility? So she gave the example of a deadlift. When you're doing a deadlift, which is, imagine this was a heavy bar and I'm coming over like that, pushing through, trying to keep my back nice and flat. So really important to work our posterior chain, particularly as women, we tend to be anterior chain dominant. So we want exercises that are going to work the back side of our body. If you find that those deadlifts, that's a limiting factor, that the grip isn't strong enough, bear with it and start at a weight you can do. And your fingers are going to be getting stronger as you get stronger. So keep training the fingers as much as anything else. Don't try and lift with the arms. The hands should just be hanging down. So it's just the fingers that are working. An alternate grip makes a load of difference because now I'm pushing the bar between my two hands, and you can obviously alternate as you go through your set. So that makes a load of difference. You can get straps that you put over the bar, over your wrist and over the bar. That can make a difference, or gloves or chalk. So all of those things can make a difference. But if you're still at the point where you still are finding that limiting factor is the grip, then as Catherine suggested, single leg deadlifts, brilliant. And as I say, single leg is brilliant for training your balance, getting rid of any imbalances as well. She also said for weighted squats, so if you were doing squats in the gym where you've got a rack and you step under the rack and then you've got the bar on the back, if shoulder mobility is a limit, so she was saying she would have trouble getting her hands back to there to hold on to the bar, I would always say, and you're not going to like me saying this, Catherine, but you want to be training that or loosening up that shoulder. You should be able to get your hands to there. So working on that shoulder mobility, doing maybe some daily, just, 1 minute a day, but to loosen up that shoulder, doing some chest opening. So on the wall like that, turning into the wall and turning away, maybe a ball or a foam roller in there as well. But if that's the limiter, then again, single leg squats are brilliant. We could be doing that. We could be doing lunges. You could go really heavy on the lunges. It's a kind of single leg activity, even though you're using both legs. So I would definitely go lunges. Catherine suggested the hack squat machine, the one with the bar that's in the machine that's fixed. I'm not a big fan of that because it limits how you're using the rest of your body. So I would go for lunges, single leg squats, rear foot elevated split squats. Any of those. I thought of another one as well, and I can't remember what it was, but yeah, any of those. Okay, next question. So Stacey asked, is it inevitable putting on weight? And if so, by how much is reasonable? So I think this is coming from the idea that people talk about when you do strength training, the muscle weighs more than fat. It's not, well, depending on what your goals are. If you're trying to, train for a bodybuilding competition or something, you're going to put on a load of muscle. Yes, you're going to put on a load of weight because you are going to be growing your body with muscle. But for most of us, what we're talking about isn't trying to, turn into Arnie. That's going to take a hell of a lot of work if we're trying to do that. For most of us, that's not going to be possible without really, really focusing on it. What we're talking about is just changing some of the fat for muscle. And in that case, yes, fat muscle does weigh more than fat. But I would challenge you to say, why does that matter? We talk about weight loss, and I try not to talk about weight loss. I talk about fat loss or body composition, because for most of us, our goal isn't weight loss, it's fat loss. Fat is what is dangerous for us in a health perspective. So fat is what we want to be getting rid of. Muscle is healthy for us in so many ways. But also muscle burns more from a weight loss perspective or from a body composition perspective. Muscle burns more fat. No, it doesn't. Muscle burns more calories than fat. And it helps improve our insulin sensitivity. So it's helping us in all of those areas. If we're worried about the weight of the extra muscle as a runner or a triathlete, trying to get up a hill or something, what we're carrying is going to help us get up the hill. The fat doesn't help us get up the hill. The muscle does. So I would say that small swap of what the fat weighs for what the muscle weighs is worth it in terms of performance and in terms of health. Even in terms of what, body composition, fat takes up more space than muscle. So even though the muscle weighs more, it's actually taking up less space. So we look thinner if that's our goal. If you strength train, do you need to eat more? Yes and no. So if you're trying to build muscle or preserve muscle, we need to eat enough protein. But I would say for all of us as women, we need to be eating enough protein anyway. So my guideline is at least 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. If you're an active woman, particularly if you're doing a lot of training, a lot of strength training or a lot of endurance training, 1.6 plus grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you're already doing that, then no. If our goal is to put on muscle, we need to make sure we're getting that protein, but we also need energy because it takes energy to build it. But if we're just talking about adding it into what we're normally doing, then fuel our training as we normally would with protein and carbs. And then no, you don't need anything additional to that. Does creatine improve performance? It can do. So creatine can be really helpful in terms of reducing the DOMS, so the delayed onset muscle soreness, but also reducing the fatigue in our muscles, both from an endurance training and from a strength training perspective. So it can help us, particularly as we get older and we find it's harder to keep that strength and that reaction speed, that power in there, then the creatine can be helping us. Creatine can also help in menopause with brain fog, and it might be brain fog that's your limiter to kind of getting yourself down to the gym. So it can really help with that. In terms of the recommended dosage, I'm not a nutritionist, I can't really give it, but what I would say is what you see why a lot of people give up with creatine is you see on the packet, it says to take a 20-gram loading phase where you're taking 20 grams a day. That is a lot. You don't need that. We just want to be boosting our creatine supplies. So I would say 3 to 5 grams is probably fine. You don't need that pre-loading phase. If you find you get stomach issues with it, put it in a large glass of water or your protein shake or a bottle, whatever, and sip it over the day rather than downing it in one. And that normally means that you're okay. Stacey also asked, should you see more defined muscles if strength training? So abs, biceps, glutes, calves. And if not, does that mean you're not doing it right? So remember, training our muscle doesn't mean we see our muscle. Losing the fat on top of the muscle, it means we see what's underneath. So this is why we can't do spot reduction. So when people go, oh, I want to have, really toned arms or really toned abs, I want toned abs, I'll do sit-ups. A, sit-ups are really bad for us, don't do sit-ups, do planks or something instead. But B, when you just train the stomach muscles, all you're doing is training the stomach muscles. If there's fat there, then it's just going to push the fat out further. So we need to be losing the fat, still train the muscle, but to be able to see it, it's the loss of fat that's going to make the difference. And that's going to come from diet and other things. So no, you don't necessarily need to see more defined muscles, but most of us will. As I said, when we start building up more muscle, we change that metabolic balance. We start having, we're burning through the fat more anyway. So which brings me back, actually, to Stacey's question of if you strength train, do you need to eat more? I talked a lot about this in my seminar last week on training for women, but we do need to fuel our training sufficiently. If you were doing a lot of extra strength training and you therefore change your metabolic base, then yes, you might need to be eating a little bit more because your metabolic rate's gone up, so you're burning through the calories faster. Sorry, I don't know if I made that clear before. Final question from Stacey. What's the best way to track improvements so that you know that what you're doing is working? Is it just being able to lift heavier? So what's your goal? If your goal is to be able to live a long and healthy life, by having that functional body that's going to protect you when you get to 50, 60, 70, 80, you're going to have to wait till you get there to find out. But, the evidence would say it's going to help you. If your goal is to be able to power up the hills stronger, then hopefully you start to see that difference as you're doing your training. If your goal is just to be more resilient generally, it's not necessarily something you're going to be able to see. But, there's so much evidence out there that says it's going to make a difference. But the things where you will be able to see the improvements are, as you say, being able to lift heavier, being able to do more reps, more total volume or heavier weights. You'll be able to see those differences. And I've got so much feedback from people who do my classes saying, I was running the other day and my knee that normally hurts isn't hurting, or I was playing with the kids and I could get down on the floor and pick them up, or I was playing on the monkey bars with the kids and I could do it. I can do a press up and I couldn't do it before. So it's all those things that you start to suddenly notice you can do that you couldn't do before, or you start to realize, I would always have, like by this time of the season, I'd be getting some aches and pains and I'm not getting them anymore. So hopefully you start to see the results for yourself. I'm getting towards the end of my sent in questions. So anybody who's watching live who has got any questions, I can't see it if you have sent them. So if you have sent them in, please do pop them in again. So in terms of the best exercises to be doing to avoid injury. So to avoid injury, you want to be doing mobility, you want to be doing stability, and you want to be doing strength to support the areas where you get injured. So mobility and stability I went over earlier, but mobility is mobility at the joint. Stability is stability at the joint, so that everything moves as it's meant to. I've just realized my phone's in shot there. I hadn't realized that before. Anyway, it'll stay there. And then strength. where do you commonly get injured? So if you commonly get injured, if you keep on picking up calf injuries, do more calf raises. If you're commonly picking up knee injuries, then it's normally coming from your glutes or your feet. So strengthen the glutes, make sure that you that the knees aren't kind of collapsing in when you're running, that the hips aren't dropping down when you're running. Strengthen the feet, so doing footwork and thinking about engaging that foot, so as the foot hits the ground, the ankle isn't collapsing in. So it's going to depend on the injury. Those are just some examples. Shoulders, again, making sure you've got full range of motion and you've got stability at the shoulder joint. And then she's also asked, how do I get rid of my menopause stomach? Big question, not a definitive answer. Again, remember, we can't spot reduce fat, so doing sit-ups is not going to get rid of stomach fat. I covered this in way more detail in my seminar last week, which I'll pop the link up afterwards. But we don't want to be trying to reduce our fueling. So many menopausal women I work with are like, oh my God, I've put on weight, particularly belly fat. And so I'm going to stop, reduce my fueling. We must fuel our training for so many reasons, but particularly as we get into menopause, if our body detects that there's not enough energy coming in to protect it for doing the exercise it wants to do, it can actually start saving the fat, going, oh, there's not enough. She keeps on getting me to go out and do that long ride and she doesn't give me enough to eat while I'm there. So I'm going to save what I've got. So it's counterproductive. Fueling your training, you will get better results, and it's not going to you're not going to put on weight. You're only trying to fuel enough to get through the session and the recovery. We're not talking about a calorie surplus, but yeah, fuel your training. But I've talked way more about that last week, so I won't go on about that again today. Ditto, ensure you're getting enough recovery. But in terms of a strength perspective, so just generally strength training, as I say, when we have more muscle, our body is more metabolically active, so it burns through the calories faster. Plus our muscle is where we store glucose, so circulating energy in our body. And so if we've got more muscle stores, it means we can store more of it rather than having to store it as fat. It also helps to reduce or improve our insulin sensitivity, which is something that we can be really vulnerable to as we go through menopause. We become less insulin sensitive. So we end up with the energy highs, the energy lows, potentially health problems from that, and storing the fat on the belly. So we want those muscle reserves to store the energy, and as all the reasons for sort of functional and healthy aging that I've already talked about. There's some people, and it's not universally accepted, but there's a lot of people that will say doing HIIT training can help you with that insulin sensitivity. So HIIT training, and I would say true HIIT training, is doing high intensity, maybe 20 seconds worth of high intensity intervals, but then something like a minute. For me, I time it based on my heart rate, and it's about a minute and a half for my heart rate to come right down. So we're not doing that like a HIIT training class where you do like 20 seconds of exercise, 10 seconds of rest. That's an endurance class because you haven't recovered enough in between. So true HIIT training, where you're doing something hard that gets your heart rate up, kettlebell swings are a brilliant one for doing that. You could have some plyometrics in there to strengthen your bones as well, but don't overdo it with the jumping, build up slowly. All of those can be really effective. I think that was all I was going to say on that one. Lucy, great name, Lucy. Lucy asked what's the relevance of strength training for women who are over 50? So 100% vital. It's so important because our muscles, our bones, our tendons, our insulin sensitivity, all of these things decrease as we go through menopause, as the estrogen declines. So all the training I've talked about so far today is going to protect us against that. So 100% relevant. It can often, if you're watching this going, oh, it's all right, I'm only 30, so I don't need to worry about that yet. Do it now, because you will build up that muscle reserves, the bone reserves. The more you have coming into menopause, the more you're going to be able to take through with you. But also, if you're saying right now, oh, I don't really fancy the gym, I'll wait until I need to do it, you are not going to feel like doing it when you hit menopause. If you don't feel like doing it when you're 30, you're not going to suddenly feel like, oh, everything else has gone tits up in my world as I hit menopause. But hey, I'm just going to start doing a gym session that I've never done for the last 50 years. So build those habits now. As I say, I see so many more women in the gym now than I used to, and people enjoying those sessions. So yeah, get with the strength training. It's never too soon to start. It's never too late to start. Few more questions related to that. So Anne, but also Julie and Fenka asked similar questions. It feels like everything's going backwards. So Anne's 60, other people around that age saying that they feel like they're doing everything right, but it feels like everything's going backwards. Now, I talked way more about this last week, so I won't talk about it again, but fuel, recovery are so important as we go through perimenopause into postmenopause. But in terms of strength and conditioning, as we get older, as we get that decline in estrogen, our joints get less good at tolerating impact and repetitive loading. So we might still have that aerobic capacity that we've had, but the body's less efficient. Kind of imagine if you're bouncing, like a noodle that you take to the swimming pool. If you're trying to do pogo jumps on a noodle rather than on a pogo stick, you're just losing all that energy. It's like, bouncing on spaghetti or something. So if we do the strength training, we're strengthening that body so we become more like that pogo stick. We get that efficient rebound recoil. So strength training, it's not the only answer, but it's definitely going to help us as we feel like we're starting to kind of lose that progression. I think we also at some stage have to accept that we will be getting slower. It's not, we can't carry on getting faster forever. I always talk about being the best you can be on the day rather than comparing yourself to somebody who's 30 years younger, including yourself when you were 30 years younger. So there's some degree of acceptance in there. But yeah, I would definitely recommend the strength and conditioning. Can't remember who it was, but somebody asked strength training exercises for triathletes with hypermobility. So remember, we want to be building that stability at the joints. We all want to be doing that. For most of us, we want to be doing mobility work. But if you are already hypermobile just means you've got more extension at that joint than your body is ideally going to have. If we've got that, then we want to train that stability even more. So really, really, really do the stability work. Don't overstretch. Often people who feel that they're hypermobile are like, oh, I need to do more. I feel tight. And they're already way over the sort of recommended mobility at that joint. So train that stability, leave the mobility, leave the stretching aside. We want to strength train in all the same places we've already been talking about. So all those exercises I've talked about, but particularly that slow descent. So if we're doing our squats, coming down slowly. So we're really training our strength as we go, or our deadlifts, whatever, but going down slowly, and don't go for full range. Whilst everybody else, I might be saying, trying to get down as deep as you can, or on the deadlift, trying to get down. For you, stop at mid-range, because your tendency is to go right over the point at which it's healthy. So stop way before that and train that mid-range, get really good at that mid-range strength. So Marissa has asked, how much recovery should we factor in for strength training? Can you do strength training in the morning and hop on the bike in the evening? Great question, Marissa. Thank you. So I know this isn't the question you've asked, but I'm going to answer this one first. Running, we want to be fresh for running. We've got the highest risk of injury running when we're fatigued. Now, sometimes as a triathlete, we do that deliberately. We do a brick session where we're coming off the bike and we go into the running deliberately fatigued, but I definitely don't do that every week because the risk of injury becomes too high. So for running, my recommendation is you do your running before strength work, not directly before it, but you do running on fresh legs. So you think, what days do I run? And your strength training, you separate that out as much as possible. Again, if you're a triathlete, maybe there's a swim in the middle or something. Now for cycling, not such a risk, but you don't want to do a session and just feel absolutely knackered and feel like you can't get your best out of the session. So for cycling, you could say, because of the way my week works, it works really well for me to do strength conditioning on a Wednesday morning, and I can only do my turbo session on a Wednesday evening. You just accept you might put out a few watts less than normal. You're still training hard because your body was fatigued going into it. So just accept your watts will be a bit lower potentially after doing that strength session. Other people find that a strength session, particularly a sort of power-based strength session, so when you're in that 5 to 8 rep range or you're doing your HIIT and everything, can really wake up your body through the turbo session. So it might be that you do your strength training and you go straight into doing your turbo session off the back of it, because that works really well for you if you've got the time to do that. So it's about playing around, finding what works for you and what works for the rhythm of your week, because you might find this is, all the science says this is the perfect thing to do, but it's irrelevant because it doesn't fit to your week. The science says the one that we do second, if we were doing them next to each other, literally next to each other, the one that we do second is the one that the body takes away more adaptations from. So you prioritize, you might say, I'm coming up to race season now. It's more important, my endurance training than my strength training. So I'll do that second. But logistically, that doesn't work for you. I always do my strength training. I do strength training at home and then I do heavy strength training in the gym. And I combine that with a swim because they're both in the same place. And it depends what time the swim pool's open as to which order I do them in. So it's got to be what's practical as well. But yeah, so run on fresh legs, don't run on tired legs, and get to know yourself how tired your legs will be. If you're just starting strength training, your legs will be sore the next day. Once you get into it, that's not inevitable. You might still find that that's the case, but it's not going to always be that your legs are sore the next day. But especially when you're at that beginning phase or just picking up the weights a little bit more, prepare to have tired legs, maybe the next day, maybe the day after that. So plan your running around that. Hope that answered your question, Marissa. Shout if it didn't. Next question, how to stop wanting to wee myself as soon as I run fast or do longer distance. So pelvic floor training makes a massive difference here. So I'm not going to go into whole pelvic floor training here. Again, we do it in Club Feel Fit, my weekly strength and conditioning classes. So if you're interested, if you go to feelfitwithlucy.co.uk/Club Feel Fit, you'll find a 2-week free trial for my classes on there. So give that a go. And we are doing a lot of focus on breathing this month. And within that, in the next few weeks, we're going to progress that into pelvic floor breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. So rather than doing the kind of, I'm sitting in the car and I'm going to do some Kegels where we just clench and we forget to relax and we end up sort of hyper engaging our muscles, instead trying to think about engaging, relaxing our pelvic floor in time with our breathing. And then that means we can do it all the time. It's not just something we have to do. We can do it all the time, and we can particularly do it in our strength training. So engaging that pelvic floor in time with our breathing, in time with our movements. Again, I'm not going to go through all that now, but we'll be going through it in Club Feel Fit in more detail. Or if you Google Girls Go Strong, I've got really good resources on it, strength training with diaphragmatic breathing. So have a Google of Girls Go Strong and find their resources there. Creatine, I think I've already answered, so I won't answer that one. And then recovery. So how much recovery do we need between sessions? It's going to depend on you. As I just said with Marissa, it depends, what you're doing, how your schedule works, how your body responds to different stuff. So there's no right or wrong answer, but your goal is not to come out of this feeling absolutely knackered. When you first start strength training, you're going to feel more tired from it because it's a new load on your body. So start easy. Everything I've said about the 5 to 8 reps, don't start there. Build up to that over the long term. So start easy, build up from there, and see how your body feels. You might need to take a little bit of a step back, which is why we traditionally do strength training over the winter. And I'd still say we're at the kind of end of winter at the moment. We don't want to be trying to start doing strength training just as our marathon training or our triathlon training is ramping up, because we're going to feel more tired from it. So build it in over the winter. Or if you're not doing if your race isn't, if you've got a triathlon in August, this is still your winter now. You've got enough time to be building this in now. If your races are coming up relatively soon, so maybe you're thinking London Marathon or something, and you're not already doing strength training, just stick to the mobility and stability for now, I would say. That's going to give you so many benefits, and it's not going to leave your body too knackered. So do the mobility, the stability, and then start to add in that strength once you've got those kind of big races out the way. Again, we do that in Club Feel Fit. The first half of the session is all mobility and stability. So anybody who doesn't want to do the strength, you've still got a really good half-hour mobility stability session to do pre-run, post-run, wherever works for you. And then you can add in the strength around that. That is all of the questions I got in advance. If anybody has got any more questions, please do pop them in now. I'm just hopefully pinning the messages for the links to the talk that I did last week and the Club Feel Fit sessions. I'll give it a few more minutes in case anybody's got any questions. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining. If you've got other ideas of lives you would like me to do in the future, give me a shout. If you've got other questions that I haven't answered, I feel like I've answered a lot. But if there's other questions I haven't answered, similarly, give me a shout and I will do my best to answer them. All right, lovely to see you. Have a lovely sunny day, and I will hopefully see you soon. I always forget how to end it.